Hi. I'm straying the course by not wearing shoes. I was wearing shoes that another of the speakers, Hannah, who's sitting over here, said were, I don't know if she said they were badass or sexy or something or what, and they are very nice, but they're not really me. They're pointed, they have heels, and my toes were going numb, so I thought I would throw them backstage and come out in my stocking feet. So thanks for having me. I'm very nervous. I don't do a lot of public speaking, so this is also me straying the course. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about my career over the past 5 or 6 years and something I did, which was to start a website called Jezebel that some of you may be familiar with. I also have notes because I'm not good at memorizing stuff, so you'll have to just bear with me. So a little bit about me. I'm a writer and an editor, as I said. I grew up in a small town in California. And when I was 18, I threw caution to the wind and sight unseen moved to New York City. I really hated where I grew up. It was small, it was insular, it was a bit snobby, it was a bit waspy, and it just didn't feel or look or represent what I was all about. I'd always felt like a bit of an outsider. And that, plus my interest in writing, was what drove me east to the big city, where people of all colors and backgrounds roamed, and there weren't going to be as many blonde, perky cheerleaders for me to deal with in New York. Now, to be honest, it wasn't like I didn't have a safety net when I moved to New York. I'd been accepted into college. I had a built-in support system, teachers, roommates, resident assistants, etc. But it was still a really scary thing moving across the country, and very few of my friends from high school were leaving Northern California, much less the West Coast. So it was one of the most courageous things I would ever do. 15 years went by. I had become a writer, which is to say that I had graduated from college and I began working for magazines like Entertainment Weekly, Glamour, Star, and InStyle magazines. I had a very great group of friends. This is about 2006, so I was about 34. But just like when I was a kid, I had this nagging feeling, this kind of ever-present unhappiness and frustration, except this time it was professional, not personal. The problem was that I hated the industry that I worked in, and I saw no way to get out of it. The media at that time was deep in the throes of a kind of celebrity worship and obsession with promoting the idea of conspicuous consumption. And nowhere was this more evident than in women's magazines, especially women's fashion, lifestyle, and service magazines, the very outlets I'd long worked for. And it wasn't just me. Almost every female writer I knew at that point, and I knew a lot of them, had worked or was working at women's magazines. Sometimes we freelanced for fancier or more serious publications, but the actual jobs at those places were mostly filled by men, and white men at that. Women's magazines, those loathsome repositories of diet tips and $25 lipstick recommendations, were where we worked to pay our bills, but also how we damaged our souls. One of those women, a friend named Ellen, approached me one day with an idea. She'd been asked to start a women's website for the digital content company Gawker Media. Would I want to help her do it? I said, absolutely not. Only because no one I knew in traditional media was working in the digital space full time. And the people that I did know who were working in digital were getting paid a pittance. And I had things to do, like pay my rent. Also, what if it failed? I had a steady job at a successful magazine owned by a big publishing company. I got a regular paycheck, deposited into my checking account every 2 weeks. I had health insurance, I had a 401k, and I had access to a company cafeteria. So why, a good one too, why, after a lifetime of doing everything right, of being the kind of good girl, of following the path I was supposed to take, would I have strayed from that course, taking a risk like that? Ellen and I ended up talking for about 2 or 3 hours that evening, and it was clear when we stopped talking and I got home that I actually was interested in what she was talking about. Billed as a female version of the popular site Gawker, this site, what I was told, would need to cover celebrity and sex and fashion and lifestyle, but with a sort of attitude that had made the company's other titles very popular and in some quarters very feared. Now, celebrity, sex, and fashion I could do, but with my own personal twist. Because you see, over the many years I'd been writing and editing stories for these magazines, I'd become increasingly disgusted by their thinly veiled misogyny and unabashed consumerism. More than just disgusted. A decade of contributing to this kind of phony, cynical, insecurity creation factory that was the modern American women's magazine had left me feeling demoralized as a content creator and hungry as a reader for something that would acknowledge how exhausting and repetitive and irrelevant the discussions had become for women. None of the women that I knew needed or wanted advice on how to find, keep, or sexually pleasure a man. We were immune to the supposed charms of cover lines like getting a beach-ready body in 2 months. And most importantly, we were annoyed that no one in charge at any of the magazines geared towards us seemed to be acknowledging that we were a lot more than the sum of our shoe collections and romantic relationships. Now, I don't have a problem with shoe collections or falling in love. It's just that celebrity culture, in addition to selling women an expensive bill of goods, was also paving the way for a renewed emphasis on selling traditional gender roles as well. The message the culture was sending was simple. Sex appeal to men is sacred, marriage and motherhood are paramount, and every celebrity engagement ring or baby bump should be breathlessly accounted for and analyzed. Those women who didn't stick with the script, who strayed the course, who gained a few pounds, or got divorced, or stayed single, or chose not to have kids, or enjoyed sex, were called out in all caps headlines, tisk-tisking over things like cellulite and baby drama and sex addiction. Now, I can laugh about this now, but the fact of the matter is that these messages were being internalized by millions and millions of young women, many of them young enough that they didn't know or remember that there was once a world that didn't so aggressively or explicitly scrutinize female body fat or a woman's marital status and use it as a barometer by which to measure her human worth. Sounds horrible, right? It was, and I knew that if we were to create a site like the one I wanted to create, to really go all out, to not pull punches, to not hold back on our critique of modern women's corporate media, we would be forever burning bridges and shutting the door on our careers that we'd enjoyed up until that point. Because the reality was that if the venture failed, it was very likely that we would as well. It was one thing to put a motto like fun, fearless female on the cover of your women's magazine. It was another to actually be fearless, especially when you're a young female writer without family connections or Ivy League degrees to fall back on. Not only would we be going after and providing an alternative to women's fashion and lifestyle magazines, we would be harshly critiquing the depiction of women in other magazines and media, including TV and film. We basically wanted to burn it all down. I talked more to Ellen than to her bosses at the company, Gawker Media. There was a strange stirring inside me, a feeling that I should, for once, just throw caution to the wind and take a chance on something that felt real, that felt like me and my friends. I finally said yes and gave notice at my job. Then Ellen bowed out of the project. That's a long story. It's not actually as dramatic as it sounds. It had to do with issues of her wanting to live back in Britain. So fast forward about 5 months, and Jezebel was born. I did not pick the name. I didn't like the name. I still hate the name. I wouldn't use the name when people ask me what I did. That's a whole other story, which I'm happy to tell anyone afterwards. But it is a name that we got. So anyway, the idea of the site, germinated by Ellen and I, and then kind of expanded upon by the 2 staffers that I'd hired, was simple and maybe even a little bit subversive. What if we could use the celebrity industrial complex, the very topics that young women have been trained to take seriously, as entry points into pop culture and progressive gender politics? What if we were able to acknowledge the primacy of pop culture that so many young women admired, and at the same time highlight issues of gender inequality and inequity? My dream was to kind of treat pop culture as a gateway drug of sorts, a way to politicize generations of young women who had grown up with toxic messages pushed by 17 and Cosmopolitan and Britney Spears videos, and who had never really been given the tools or the examples or the opportunities with which to approach the world differently. Rather than patronizingly dismissing female interest in mass media and pop culture as a complete distraction or waste of time, we would use it as an opportunity to make points about the status of women in contemporary Western society. Just as the women's magazines I'd worked for and hated working for had pushed and normalized an obsession with 10 sex moves or fall fashion favorites or best body workouts, and those are real headlines that I wrote. I suspected that the repetition of ideas, phrases, and themes regarding politics, reproductive rights, racism, and feminism within and outside of the context of pop culture might normalize those discussions for a younger generation. Maybe, just maybe, more young women would be willing to embrace or reclaim both the idea of feminism and the word itself. You probably know the rest of the story. The site became successful, became beloved. We did too, a little bit. It won awards and accolades and attention and some criticism, which is not always a bad thing. We had strayed the course and it had worked. Furthermore, our readers, inspired by our example, were straying the course themselves. They were speaking their minds, sometimes they said more freely than they ever had before. They were quitting their jobs to become writers. One of the writers on the site right now, which I don't run anymore, was a banker in Chicago who was a very prolific commenter on the site, eventually quit her job as a banker in Chicago, moved to New York, and was hired by the site to write, which was, I thought, just very inspiring. Some of the readers of the site were quitting the site altogether so that they could start their own sites. This was usually done in kind of like a huff, like they'd flounce off, but I do think it said something that we'd inspired people even to leave us. Copycat sites were springing up, giving more ammunition to the idea that progressive women's content was not only embraced but commercially viable. And mainstream media publications were beginning to run explicitly feminist content, and a lot of it, and without apology. It felt like a really exciting time. But let's be clear, straying the course was, and is, a lot easier said than done. For me, the courage to try something new and set fire to the life and career I'd once led required over a decade of built-up frustration and anger and dismay. I'd reached a point in my life where I was so fed up with the media and the culture around me, the script that we were all supposed to follow, that I felt I could do little else but explode. It was anger and opportunity, not ingenuity or idealism, that had pushed me down the path I ended up taking. So all this is a way of saying that the ability to follow your dreams or carve out your own path sounds appealing on a greeting card, but it doesn't come easily or naturally to most people. Money, power, and privilege are a big part of that. I never would have been able to take a chance on trying something new if I'd still been saddled with student loan debt, or if the industry that I was in or entering into was flailing in some major way, or if I'd looked at the culture around me and seen myself reflected in the status quo. The idea of straying, the possibility of reinvention was really only something I could embrace and internalize when my patience had hit rock bottom. I can tell you to stray the course all I want, but the fact of the matter is that it is often a luxury to be able to do so. When I was thinking about what I might want to talk about today, I decided to look up the word stray. Merriam-Webster defines the verb this way: to go in a direction that is away from a group or from the place where you should be, and to wander from company, restraint, or proper limits, to roam about without fixed direction or purpose, to move in a winding course, to move without conscious or intentional effort, to become distracted from an argument or train of thought. To go from a place you should be, to breach proper limits, to become distracted. It sounds negative. The dictionary definition of the word as a noun is similarly gloomy, defining the latter as an animal, such as a cat or dog, that is lost or has no home. Also, a person or thing that is separated from a group, and a domestic animal that is wandering at large or is lost. There's an implicit disapproval to this too, to this idea of being lost, of having no home. But I think with a bit of an attitude adjustment, we might be able to look at the idea of being lost, of straying, and also of being astray in a more positive light. Let me put it this way. I'm willing to bet that a large number of the people in this audience think of themselves as strays somewhat. Some of you are away from a permanent home, so you're strays in a sort of traditional sense. Many others, I'd wager, don't feel like you're part of any one thing, that you have interests and allegiances and loves and hates in multiple arenas, and that some of those things contradict each other. This can be unsettling and very scary, especially when you're young. But it's also a good thing, feeling like a nomad, because even if your wanderings and your feelings of unrootedness are more theoretical than physical. Sorry, guys. Feeling like you're on the outside looking in, whether that's because of your economic class or your racial background or your sexual or gender orientation or your political views, provides you with a way to see the world with fresh eyes, to engender curiosity and discovery. And I promise you that someday, no matter how uncomfortable those feelings get, they will serve you well, both personally and professionally. Some of those benefits may not be obvious at first. Some of them will, as was the case with our little website that could, in which we were able to translate our own feelings of disappointment and disgust and, yes, disconnectedness with the status quo into a shelter of sorts, where like-minded individuals, the other strays, could congregate and flourish, and then stray again. One more thing about the idea of being a stray. Some of you may be familiar with the memoirist and novelist Cheryl Strayed, who wrote a gripping, best-selling account of her 1,100-mile hike on the Pacific Coast Trail called Wild. Strayed is not her original surname. That was Nyland, but Strayed changed it in 1995. In Wild, she explains why. After the untimely death of her mother and the divorce of her first husband, she decided to embrace the unknown, and I think that her explanation is something we can all kind of learn from. Here it is. I pondered the question of my last name, mentally scanning words that sounded good with Cheryl. Nothing fit until one day when the word strayed came into my mind. I immediately looked it up in the dictionary and knew it was mine. Its layered definitions spoke directly to my life and also struck a poetic chord: to wander from the proper path, to deviate from the direct course, to be lost, to become wild, to be without a mother or father, to be without a home, to move about aimlessly in search of something, to diverge or digress. I had diverged, digressed, wandered, and become wild. I saw the power of the darkness. Saw that, in fact, I had strayed, and that I was astray, and that from the wild places my straying brought me, I knew things I couldn't have known before. Thanks.